We start off, all mics are muted. And unless you're specifically called on, request that you do keep your mics muted. Barking dogs, flushing toilets, that sort of thing can be very distracting. We'll do questions towards the end, but feel free to throw questions in the chat or to virtually raise your hand. And if it's something that can wait till the end, we'll wait till the end to keep the continuity. But if it's something that's really pertinent to the slide that's up right then we'll call on Rob to answer it at that point. And be patient. We're all volunteers. We're doing the best that we can, but we don't get paid for this. So first, a little bit about the RA Center. RA Center is a very large campus right by Bronson Avenue in Riverside. Nice view of the river there, and back behind here, the Taxation Center. This picture gives you some idea of the size of the area and how big it is. What you see over here, which used to be the hockey rink, is now the largest indoor pickleball league in the city. And that teeny tiny blue building over there is our headquarters where we keep all our paddling stuff. Some basic stats about the RA. There's not a whole lot that happens at the RA that you can't find somewhere else, but I don't know of anywhere else in the city where you can find it all under one shop, all under one roof. And mission, vision, and values. Essentially, the idea is if you want to get involved in sports, go to the RA. That's what the vision is. There are plans coming up in the future that we'll see, if they come to fruition, an entire aquatic center with three swimming pools, including one suitable for international competition. This gives you an idea of the variety of different activities. You know, I already mentioned pickleball. They have archery, fencing, chess club, all compete internationally. Some of you may remember Linda Tom, the Olympic gold medalist in shooting. She was out of the RA Center. We don't have a picture there of what I think is the best activity, which is the Canoe Club. The other thing that's very popular is their summer camps. Because the ERA has so many different sports, it means that the summer camps can be tailored to all kinds of different things. So over here, for example, you see a picture of a summer camper doing archery. And, you know, it'd be trained by somebody who's a professional archer. Another thing which is becoming very popular is something called the Strong Woman Program, which is aimed at women who are middle-aged and above and concentrates a lot on strength training. And they've found that it does amazing things for both the physical and the mental health. So Canoe Club, we started in 1952. I shouldn't say we, I wasn't around then. Not by much, but I wasn't around then. We were at the YMYWCA until 2012 when we moved over to the RA Center. What's key about the club is we're all run by volunteers, including the people who do the training. And when we talk about the training, you know, it's some pretty advanced training as well. So if somebody wants to go on a trip, they'll say, you know what, I feel like going to such and such a lake or such and such a river. Who wants to join me? And they post on the calendar. And people sign up, and then everybody on the trip shares in the trip. So one person might bring breakfast, another one might offer transportation, and so on. At the end of the day, all expenses get shared, split out, and everybody has a good time. Okay. So we have day, weekend, longer trips, flat water, white water, family programs, training, canoe and kayaks. So, I mean, the other thing is if you need a canoe, it's going to cost you. To rent a canoe for a day is between $15 and $20. And, that's shared between two people. Whitewater canoes, they can go for $25, kayaks, $10. The other group equipment, PFDs, paddles, pot sets, all of that comes free of charge. So if you want to get off and get outside, to me, not only is it a great bunch of people, but you're not going to find a more economical one. Okay? I will mention that this middle photograph, not a recommended technique. But it is something that we do cover off in training. The other thing is, if you look in this picture here, that is a 70-pound canoe that little teeny tiny person is rescuing over their canoe, which goes to show you that some of the rescue techniques are a whole lot simpler than you need. And canoe doesn't require strength, it just requires a little bit of technique. And I forgot to update my slide, darn. So on with the show, which is not aeronautical maritime search and rescue. It's Weather 101 with our host, Rob Boggs, professional meteorologist, got his start working with Dave Phillips, that you may recognize from Environment Canada. Since then, he's worked with a number of different companies doing meteorology. The one he does now is used by companies such as Hydro Ottawa for detailed weather predictions that they use to determine what they expect the peak load to be in the middle of the afternoon. So do they need more power, or can they keep the generator down a little bit? City of Ottawa uses their company to help predict what's going to happen and when do they need to send out the ice clearing and so on. So Rob, I'll turn it over to you. And I'm going to go on mute and no video so I don't distract anybody.
Thank you, Mark. And today was a beautiful, benign day, not too much weather out there. I hope people were able to take advantage of it and go for a walk. But I thought I'd start with a short video clip just to remind you how severe winter weather could be. And so, Mark, why don't you share your screen and play that short video clip.
Every so often, the collective consciousness of our entire nation, from coast to coast to coast, is captured by a single solitary event. Unfortunately, it is often a terrible tragedy that brings us together. Last week in Canada, such a terrible tragedy occurred, a catastrophe that will affect the country for decades to come. There was snow on the streets of Toronto. Snow in Toronto. We're not making this up.
I remember it just like it was last week. I opened the door and looked out, and there it was. It was everywhere. I'm sorry. This is hard.
When I saw my Lexus in the driveway, it was covered. You could not see in, you could not see out. It finally hit home. Toronto had been a target. We had been hit by snow.
Back to you, Rob.
Here we go. So, Mark, you're getting full screen right there.
Rob, we're not getting full screen, we're getting a part screen.
What I'll do here.
Let's start a slideshow.
Try hitting F5.
You're still not getting the full screen?
No,
Mark, did you load it on yours?
Yeah, just give me a second. I'll get going on it right now. I did warn you that we're all volunteers at this.
here.
Mark, are you seeing it full screen now?
There, is that what you're looking for?
Yep.
Okay, so just let me know when you want the next slide and I'll bring it up.
Okay. Great. So tonight, what I hope to do is teach you a few things, and hopefully a lot of this will be kind of a gut feel for you. I'm sure when you've been out canoeing or hiking, you have a gut feel about the weather. We've all been hit by some storms, and hopefully what I'll do today is reinforce some of the things you've learned just by gut feel about the weather. This was a trip that we did last summer. Paul was leading us on the Ristual French River trip, and we had some good weather, some of which I'll be showing during the slideshow tonight. Next slide. So tonight, some of the areas I'll be looking at is I'll introduce synoptic weather systems and patterns. And when I show you that on some weather maps, hopefully you'll be able to recognize it when you're in the field, and I'll show you some tips of how to recognize different systems when you're in the field. I'll look at reading a weather map and understanding cloud types, and all this will relate to some tips I'll give that you could look at what's going on now or overnight and decide what the next day might be looking like. I'll also give some tips on reading environmental signals of what might be going on and going over some typical weather forecast sources. And then I'll finish up tonight with a long-range outlook of the spring and summer. And I hope I'll have some good news for you. Go ahead, Mark. So I do a lot of training sessions across Canada for various clients, and we have various people who do training. So they often ask that we put a slide in about who the trainer is. This is a little bit about me, and I want to say that I do a lot of outdoor things. This particular picture that was on day 11 of a 150-kilometer hike through the Rockies. I do a lot of whitewater and flatwater canoeing and winter camping, backcountry skiing, all kinds of things. And so it's really great to have a good knowledge of the weather. Next slide. So one of the first things I'd like to introduce is reading a weather map. And on the weather map, you see the H for the high pressure area, the red L for the low. And what you're also seeing are some of the white lines that are on there. And what the white lines are is they mark kind of like a topo map. Those are graduations between different isobars of air pressure. And the air pressure will be higher where there's the high, and then lower where you have a low. And wherever you have really tight lines across the that are tight together, that's going to give you a really high wind right there. And a thing to keep in mind is that winds go clockwise around the high and counterclockwise around the low. And so as the first tip for how to look at weather systems when you're out in the field, I'm just going to stand up and move back here. And if you put your back to the wind, so the wind is going straight at your back, and you put your left arm out at about a 45-degree angle, that's going to be where the low pressure system is. And So if you have a normal prevailing wind out of the northwest, that means you'll be in a high pressure. You put your back to the wind, that's northwest wind, put your left arm out, and that means the wind, the low pressure system is downwind of you. And Mark, if we could go back to the weather map there. So I was saying winds always go clockwise around the high, counterclockwise around the low. And another thing is that in the northern hemisphere, weather always goes west to east. In the southern hemisphere, it's the other way. It goes east to west. And you might be watching Ian Black on TV at night, and you're seeing Colorado low, like this kind of thing we see right in the middle of the screen. And on Ian's radar and his TV picture, you're seeing a system move out of the southeast. So it's moving from west to east. But if you look out your window, the winds or the flag is going to be flying out of the east or southeast. And that's because at the leading edge of a low, the winds are always going to be going counterclockwise, and you're getting that typically southeasterly wind. So that's one of your first indicators when you're out in the field. If you know if the high pressure is moving into your area, then you'll probably have 2 or 3 sunny, beautiful days. If you put your back to the wind and you put your left arm out and the low is approaching you out of the west, then you're in for a storm. So that's one of the first indicators. And Mark, next slide. This is what a meteorologist would look at. And so there's a little more information on here, but generally where you've got the high pressure areas and the isobars are far apart, it would just about be a dead calm. And where you're seeing the isobars really close together, it's going to be a very strong wind. And the wind is trying to go from the high towards the low to even up the pressures. And so that's how we get the really strong winds out there. Next image, Mark. One other thing, I'll be telling you about places, sources where you could get weather information. This is a map I like to look at. Let's say it's Tuesday and you're going out for a long weekend, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday trip. This particular one, that was in June back in 2018. I was probably doing some kind of trip. And this might be hard to see the geography at first. This is the Pacific coast right there. The Great Lakes are right here. Ottawa is right there. This is the James Bay and Hudson Bay area. So Ottawa would be right there. And if you, when I show you the source for this map, if you go into that, say on a Monday or Tuesday, and get an idea of what's going on for the weekend, you could know if you better bring really good guide tarp and good rain gear, or if you're going to, maybe you could leave that tarp back there. So this is a really good weather map. This particular one shows precipitation, and there's other ones that show the high or low pressure and temperatures and different things like that. Next, Mark, map. Next, there we go. One other thing that you could look for is where you see that ridge there. If you are taking the shingles off your roof and you're going to have a completely bare roof and you want to re-shingle it, a ridge is great for having, it blocks the, you see that low pressure below the ridge, it'll block any bad weather from getting in. And quite often in July and maybe early August, we'll get weather where you get those ridges. And at the bottom left, you're seeing a trough there. And the trough is a thing that makes meteorologists look really bad. That's where we'll get 2 or 3 really bad days, inclement days, where it'll change between light rain, heavy rain, no rain. And in the winter, it might be the difference between freezing rain, snow, and nothing. And a trough usually means that you have several sequences of precipitation, nothing, precipitation, nothing, whereas a ridge will block anything from getting in. So if you look at the Environment Canada homepage and look at their jet stream, you could sometimes, you'll be able to see the highs, the lows, and if there's a ridge or a trough at a certain time. So these are some things you might look at 3 or 4 days before you're going out on a trip. And next page, Mark. A great thing to look for is an omega block, and this is shaped like the Greek letter omega. When you have a high pressure in the center of that, you're going to have the bad weather blocked from coming into your area. And I remember when Carol and Glenn were on their canoe trip, there were a few times where there was that omega block out there and there was nothing that could move into your area. So this is a really good indicator, and that trough is a really bad thing. That means you may want to reconsider going on the trip that particular weekend. Next image. Okay, here I'll talk about some general storm tracks that we have in Ontario. And one thing you'll notice is that they all seem to converge coming right through central Ontario. Mark, if you do the next slide. The first one I'll talk about is the Alberta Clipper. That's that blue line that comes out of Alberta. It's called a Clipper because it travels very fast and might travel 1,000, 2,000 kilometers a day. Alberta Clippers tend to make meteorologists look really good. It tends to be a shorter precipitation event, and that's one of the ones where the wind will veer out of the northwest once the cold front has gone through your area, and it'll be dry air, and you'll be in a high pressure system. So an Alberta Clipper is a great thing to have come through your area. It means you'll get cooler, drier air after the storm's gone through. And next image, Mark. One that isn't so good for Ontario weather, or if you're canoeing in Quebec or so, is a Colorado low. That flows out of the Colorado area, and that's picking up moisture. As I was saying, the winds go counterclockwise around the low, so it's going to pick up moisture from the Gulf and Mexico, and that could drop really big amounts of rainfall in the summer, snowfall in the winter, and in the winter that could also mix and produce freezing rain as well. And this is one of the ones that makes meteorologists look bad. Colorado lows go very slow, and that's where we might get 2 or 3 really overcast days, intermittent rain, light rain, heavy rain, and it's very hard for a forecaster to get it right, because sometimes it'll shift south of the Great Lakes, north of the Great Lakes, and it's a big question of where it's going to be going. And next image, Mark. Another type of system we get here is the Gulf low, and typically that's where it'll be the hurricanes coming through. Hurricane Hazel is a Gulf low, and there where it says that's rare for Ontario, it's the really heavy precipitation. But if we're getting a Gulf low, that'll track and bring that really warm, heavy air, and usually that lasts for quite a few days as well. And next image, Mark. And the last weather system I want to talk about is a Cape Hatteras low. That'll swing up the US coast, and sometimes it'll come over the Appalachian Mountains, and we could get the effects of it here in the Ottawa area, or the kind of Western Quebec, Central Quebec. And that could bring really heavy precipitation because it's carrying that moisture-laden air off the coast. And so that just gives you storm tracks. And Mark, let's do the next image. And as I was saying at the beginning, a thing you'll notice is they all seem to converge through the Ontario area. So it's a particularly difficult area with the Great Lakes for forecasters to predict. And next image, Mark. Another key thing to get out of the talk tonight is a thing called Dewpoint. And I'm not sure how many of you have heard about Dewpoint before. Here is an observation from Ottawa Airport, or I guess that was Canada Orleans, and it's giving you the temperature of minus 1.4 and then the dew point of minus 10.5. And meteorologists really look at the dew point a lot. And if you imagine a place like St. John's, Newfoundland, where they often have fog and really rainy or snowy conditions, the temperature and dew point will come together. And where the temperature comes down and hits the dew point, where you have 100% humidity, and that's what the dew point is. When the air is totally saturated and there's 100% humidity, that's the dew point. And temperature can never go down below the dew point. It could, once the temperature hits the dew point, you will have snow or fog or something in there. So it's a really good indicator for meteorologists to know how dry the air mass is and whether or not you'll get precipitation out of it. And Mark, let's do the next image. And to explain the dew point, maybe I could give you the beer can effect. And Mark, just click on your mouse there. On a hot day, if you take a beer can outside of the fridge, you'll often see that little sheen of sweat or the beads on the outside. And why is that? And Mark, could you hit your enter or down key? There we go. So the air temperature in the room might be plus 28, but the dew point of that air mass might be 15 degrees, and your fridge is probably somewhere around 4 degrees Celsius. So because the beer can is lower than the dew point of 15, the beer can's only 4 degrees. That's where you're getting that the beating on the outside of the can. And Mark, let's do the next image. And here I could explain how you get frost. And here I'm looking at 3 different things. The road temperature, that's the blue line. And right here around the Ottawa area, we have very comprehensive weather stations where we actually have pucks in the pavement. We have sensors 40 centimeters underground and 1.5 meters underground. And we have about, let's say about 10 to 12 weather stations around the Ottawa area where we're measuring all this kind of thing. And by the way, that lets us produce a very accurate forecast because pavement temperature doesn't vary as much as air temperature. And the whole thing about snow on the ground is you want to know what the road temperature is, not the air temperature. So here the blue line is the road temperature. When it goes down through the 0 mark, any standing water could freeze. But a key thing for us and for, let's say, the city of Ottawa or MTO, the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, when that blue line goes down through the dew point, that's where you get black ice on the road. Or if you look at your windshield and through the night, your windshield will be nice and clear. And then all of a sudden at maybe 6:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, you get that black, you get the white hoarfrost appear on your windshield. And that's when your windshield temperature is going down below the dew point. And then you have to scrape it off. But if you waited long enough where at point C there, the temperature of your windshield or the temperature of the road is going above the dew point, the frost would just sublimate right off your windshield. And if there's black ice on the road, it would just sublimate off and the road would be clear again. And just to show you what kind of detailed forecast people like the city of Ottawa use, Mark, if you do the next slide. This is image for the 407. They tend to be very proactive about their road maintenance. And this forecast was released 24 hours before a black ice incident. And here it shows exactly what time the black ice would occur. It looks like it was about 3:15 in the morning, and the black ice will be there till about 8:30 in the morning. And what they would do in a place like City of Ottawa or say the 407 is they'll put a salt brine, so that's salt and water down on the road the night before. And you might see that here where there's a brine truck going along and there's water pouring out the back, but there's actually a 27% solution of salt there. And they put that down the night before, and then you won't get black ice. So hopefully in the Ottawa area, you're not seeing as much black ice incidents as we had maybe 15, 20 years ago. Next slide, Mark. And I just want to close up with the temperature dew point and say another tip for you if you want to be your own meteorologist and out to us guys where we're paid to do the forecast is if you look at the dew point here in Ottawa and you could get it, like I said, from the Ottawa airport. If you look at the dew point at, let's say 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and you're in one of those high pressure systems where there's no clouds out there, you could bet your partner or one of your work colleagues, you could figure out the overnight low. And let's say the dew point was -5 degrees and you bet them, you think the overnight low be say -4.5, -4, you're going to be right 90% of the time if you're in one of those high pressure areas. If you've got a trough going through or low pressure and the temperatures are actually getting warmer overnight, that doesn't work. But if you want to do your own forecast, just look at the dew point at like 5 o'clock at night, and you're going to be pretty close to the overnight low. Why is that? It's because there's a lot of radiation heat loss overnight, and the temperature of the air will come down and it'll go very close to the dew point, and so that'll be your overnight low. And to bring that to a canoe trip, this is my tent on our Restool loop, and you'll notice I didn't have a fly on the top, and that's because we had warm front, or we had a cold front go through the day before. We had severe thunderstorms, a really black sky, and then it cleared right up. And if you ever get out of your tent in the morning and there's a thick dew on the grass, thick dew on your tent, you're going to have a really good day, unless you've got a trough coming through or something like that. But overall, a good indicator for you is if you've got good dew outside in the morning, you don't need to bring your raincoat with you that day. If you've got no dew on the grass or no dew on the tent, that's a bad sign. And then you probably are going to get rain. And part of the reason is that that means you probably have cloud cover, and there's a good chance you might get rain. And that's where that old saying about red sky at night, sailors delight, red sky in morning, sailors take warning. That there's some weather sayings that are true, some that aren't, but that is a very good one, and one that does tend to work out. So that's my talk on dew point and getting dew on the grass. That'll be a sign if you're going to have a good day or not. And let's do the next image, Mark. I was saying I would tell you about some good weather sources. This is a thing that my group uses on long hikes. It's DeLorme InReach, and it'll give you both the distance that you're going. You could use it as SOS to get emergency help out there, but you could also get weather forecasts on it. Gives you a very basic forecast, and you could use it as a satellite phone if you ever need help or need a different pickup place. So that's what my group uses, InReach. And there you could see that particular hike. We did 171 kilometers. That was the north boundary at Jasper. And next image, Mark. Another really good source for you, and this is a lightning alerting thing. And by the way, this is totally free. They do have a professional one, but I sometimes lead hikes with the Alpine Club here in Ottawa or other areas, and you could set up alarms. You see that alarm on the right side. And what I do for mine is I set up alarm when thunderstorms are coming within about let's say 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers. Usually I'll set it up for 30 kilometers, and then I'll set an inner band for maybe 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. And I did this, I think, on last night on Tuesday, and there were, oh, it's missing the thing on the left there, but it was giving lightning hits. There were some down around the Utica area down in New York State. And this is a really good thing, whether you want it for canoeing or a baseball team or anything like that. And it's totally free. So if you Google Blitzer tongue, and there I'm showing you what the app looks like, you could set it up on your cell phone. And this will work anywhere, even where there's no cell, because it works off satellite on your cell phone, much like GPS that will work. And so that's a really good source for lightning information. And one little tip for you, by the way, is if you're ever on a canoe trip or even in the city, and if the hair, I'll just say that whenever lightning wants to strike the ground, it's finding 5 or 6 areas where it's getting the strongest connection. And if you ever have the hair on your arm stand up, you're one of those 5 or 6 places where it's trying to make a connection. If that ever happens, where your hair stands up, a good thing to do is go down on all 4s on your hands and knees, make a kind of roundish body, and you are a target for the lightning. And there's 2 kinds of lightning. There's negative hits and positive hits. If you get hit by a negative hit, you'll probably live through it, but a positive one, that will kill you. So this Blitzer tongue is a really good source for lightning alerts. And next slide, Mark. I was saying I would give sources. One thing I use a lot is if you Google the NOAA 6 to 10 day and the or the 10 to 14 day forecast. NOAA is out of the US, and I find their 6 to 10 day and 10 to 14 day are pretty good for trip planning. They'll give you an idea if it's going to be warmer or colder. I was saying a buddy of mine is doing that big ski in Gatineau Forest this weekend, and right now the NOAA 6 to 10 day shows that although we were pretty warm on the weekend and today was really nice, it turns colder in the next 6 to 10 day and 10 to 14 day period. And it shows you both the temperature and precipitation, if it's going to be higher or lower than normal. And the NOAA just shows the US, but you could kind of interpolate it into Canada. And I'll be showing some NOAA images a bit later. I was saying that I really like using this maybe 4 to 5 days out for a trip to know if there's going to be heavy precipitation. And this is the link that where you could get that. And it'll give you all these time periods. So you could get the weather for the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday, and get an idea. So that's going out to, I guess it's 10 days. And you're getting a pretty good overview of whether or not it looks good. I remember once I was doing a winter camping trip in Killarney, and it showed that there was going to be heavy freezing rain on the Friday when we wanted to go in. And then that was going to go right through a big high pressure, but really cold temperatures on the Saturday. So we didn't go in on the Friday. We waited for that freezing rain to go through. We went in on the Saturday, and it was nice and dry, really cold, but dry. And some people that did go in on the Friday, all the zippers were frozen shut. So I like using this to give me a kind of outlook before a trip of whether or not you're going to be into good or bad weather. And next slide, Mark. And here, what I'll do is go into a little information about cloud types. And you're seeing on the far left there, the cumulus clouds, and I'll be doing some other images after this of different cloud types. The cumulus, like cotton ball, fluffy clouds, those are a good weather sign. And then as you're getting vertical development to that cumulonimbus, or pilots would call that a CB. And when you're getting that vertical development, that's building into a thunderstorm. and you're probably going to be getting some heavy rain and downdrafts out of that. And sometimes the cumulus clouds that we see on the left, they'll start solidifying into more of a stratus, and they'll thicken, and that indicates the cloud systems are developing into more of a pattern. And Mark, let's go to the next slide and I'll show some of the individual types of the clouds. So on the far left, that's a perfect cloud to have on a canoe trip. The nice cotton ball cumulus clouds, they're usually indicative of a really good day. And that's where you get the red sky at night, sailors delight, red sky at morning, sailors take warning, because the sunset will be highlighting those clouds. And those are generally good weather clouds. As they start, if you've had some rain in the previous days and you have a lot of heating during the day, sometimes the cumulus could start building into towering cumulus, and you could even go into the cumulonimbus on the far right, where it goes into the anvil shape, and that would be a thunderstorm type of cloud. So the puffy clouds on the far left are good. The ones you're seeing on the right are bad. And next image, Mark. Another good sign that I use a lot is the cloud you see on the far left. I call that a stratus fractus, or it's like mare's tails if you think of a white horse and the white tails flying in the wind. That usually means that you're going to be getting a change in the weather in the next 24 hours. That's a really high altitude cloud. That particular cloud might be 30 or 40,000 feet. And that means there's a lot of energy and a lot of turbulence in the air mass up there. And the more that the cloud is not uniform, that where you see that kind of mare's tail really flowing thing, that's a really good sign that if you're on a canoe trip, you're probably in for bad weather the next day. As the cloud thickens, you get more of that cirrostratus, so the weather system might be coming more towards you. And on the far right, we're seeing a lot of turbulence where the moisture is collecting in the cloud and then decided there's nothing. And so that's indicating a lot of turbulence, upward turbulence there. So that one on the far left, that's one to worry about if you're on a canoe trip. And next image, Mark. Here's low-level cloud development. The stratocumulus, that's sort of the mid-level, the one on the left. And so we see the clouds thickening. You're probably going to be getting rain in the next 12 to 24 hours. And then as you get into that nimble stratus on the right, there's probably a big thunderstorm above there. And you're going to be in for pretty heavy rain, and you better get that tarp out. And next image, Mark. This funnel cloud type is Mamatis, and the two times where I've seen tornadoes, there is this Mamatis cloud out there, and if it's got a greenish tinge, that's even worse. And that indicates there's a lot of turbulence going on up there, and you're in for a real good storm. If you're seeing that type of storm type, it's a good time to get off the water, go and set up a tarp for your group, and take shelter. And next image, Mark. And here, what I'm going to touch on just briefly is different cold fronts and warm fronts and indicators. I was talking about how you could put your left arm out and see if you've got the low downwind of you or upwind of you. And with a cold front, usually you'll get a temperature drop right after that. And I was talking about a wind shift. The wind will shift out of the northwest. And that's another good sign. If you're in a low pressure on you're getting rain, and then you're seeing the wind veer around. If you're in rain, you're probably in a southeasterly or easterly wind. And as the wind starts backing and comes out of the west, that means the low pressure system is moving out of your way, and you're getting into the high pressure, and you're going to be getting really good weather in the next few hours or days or so. So when a cold front goes through, you get the temperature drop, the dew point will drop, you get a rise in the air pressure and a significant wind shift, and visibility really improves. So that's some of the things to look for. And what does that look like from the side? Next shot, Mark. So here's a cold front advancing, and what it does is pushes the warm air aloft, and the warm air, as it gets into the colder temperatures at a higher altitude, that'll make the clouds develop. So that's where we were seeing that cirrostratus before, and it'll thicken up the clouds, and you might get severe rain along the frontal edge of that cold front. And next slide, Mark. On the other side of it is warm front, and on a weather map that's shown with the red line and those bars on it. And when a warm front goes through, you'll get a temperature rise, the dew point rises, you'll get a moderate wind shift, and it'll probably be a wind more out of the east or southeast. And usually warm front is longer lasting, the change from cold to a warm front, and you might have a longer duration of a storm, might be more rain, and the rain lets up, and then you get rain again. And so it tends to last a bit longer. And next slide, Mark. You're doing a great job, by the way, Mark. So as a cold front, as a warm front goes over top of the cold front, it'll develop, it'll thicken up the clouds, and it'll go aloft, and that's a very stable air pattern because warm air wants to go up and the cold air is down, and so then that'll develop the warm front over our system. And next image, Mark. And a thing that, again, makes meteorologists look bad is when you get a stationary front, or sometimes it's called a quasi-stationary front because it might move around the little, it moves through, and that's where you'll get those things where it'll rain, clear up, rain, clear up. And that probably is going to be more than 24 hours of that kind of thing. That'll be really unsettled weather. That's hard for a meteorologist to predict, and a hard one for you to predict. And I'm sure you've all been in that kind of weather situation out there. Next slide, Mark. And one that also is hard for a forecaster is a occluded front, and that's where you have a cold air ahead of the front, and then very cold air in behind. And that makes the warm, humid air go up. And when you get that in the winter, that's where you get freezing rain, because the warm air aloft is coming down through the cold air below. And just to illustrate that, Mark, let's go to the next slide. Here, what I did is, this is all the tracks of major ice storms from 1948 to 2002. And on the bottom right, you see the really big ice storm from 98. And that's a really stable air mass. And you might remember that was persistent for about 3 weeks out there. And the warm air was aloft. When the precipitation comes down through the cold air, the rain freezes, turns into freezing rain, and quite often that'll just sit there right in the Ottawa Valley. So we seem to get that quite a bit. And I remember a story of one glider pilot one time. He's flying through a freezing rainstorm, and he was getting a lot of freezing rain build up on his canopy. So that was really making his plane heavy. So he decided to eject. He opened his canopy and went out of the plane and popped his parachute, but a warm drop of warm air brought him up into the upper altitude, and he got ice on his parachute, and he plummeted down and died. So should he have stayed in his glider or gone out in the parachute? It's hard to say. But those are all the tracks of ice storms. And once again, you could see they seem to come through southern Ontario, and you see that persistent Arctic high at the up in Quebec, and the low pressure comes out of either Colorado or the Gulf, and we get those major ice storms. Next slide, Mark. And another thing, I'm sure you've all seen our sundogs out there, or you could sometimes get a halo around the moon. And that means you're getting a lot of moisture in the upper altitude. Sundogs will typically be way up there at 30 or 40,000 feet. And you could, that means it's kind of like those stratus fractus or those mare's tails. That means you've got a lot of moisture in the upper atmosphere. You're probably going to have a change and maybe have some precipitation in the next 24 hours. And so that's another sign for you. Next slide, Mark. And Mark, do you have any weather jokes left?
But the ancient Romans used to like thunderstorms so they could hail Caesar.
I wish I had all these weather jokes. And let's go to the next slide, Mark. So I was talking about the NOAA 6 to 10 day. This one I downloaded just the other day. And although we had warm weather on the weekend and today was pretty nice, here you're seeing the outlook for March 12th to 16th. And like I was saying, it only shows the US, but you could pretty well interpolate that. It looks like all on the Great Lakes Basin and where we are in Ottawa, Toronto, Kingston, any areas up through Sault Ste. Marie, it's all going to be cooler for the next 6 to 10 day period. And this is the overall average. You still might have some warm days, cold days, but it's just saying the overall average will be colder, and they issue at 10 to 14 days. So if you just Google NOAA 6 to 10 day outlook, you'll be able to get that map. And next image, Mark. Here, what I'll do to close off is give you the outlook for the summer, for the spring and summer. And what we usually do is compare the Environment Canada forecast, and you can see it on the left, and that's for March, April, May, to the US forecast on the right, and that's for the same time period, March, April, May. And if the two maps are more if they're more in agreement, then we tend to put more emphasis on it. And if there's a lot of diversion between them, then there'll be a lot more uncertainty. Overall, I personally find the US one to be a little better for the long range, but you could use both and decide which one you like. This is showing the Environment Canada long range for the spring. You can see it's going to be much colder on the West Coast, and the US long range is in agreement for that. The Environment Canada one says all through Quebec, going right out to Newfoundland, is going to be colder for the spring, warmer way up in the Arctic, which will be bad for the melting of the sea ice. And right here in the Ottawa area, Environment Canada is saying will be a little bit cooler, but the American long range is saying that we're going to be having a nice early spring and early end of winter. And I was saying that I tend to go a little more with the US one. And so that's what they're showing for the temperatures. Mark, let's go to the next slide, and there'll be precipitation. And for the spring outlook for precipitation, you could see that the Great Lakes Basin is showing above normal precipitation, both on the Environment Canada one and the US long range. So that tends to indicate a little more agreement. So maybe we will be getting more rainfall in the springtime. And because that's March, April, May, there could be some snow mixed in with that, as we'll be seeing this Saturday. And they've got, it looks like down in the US Southwest, down where they had all those forest fires, it's looking very dry down there. And as well in the Canadian map, they're saying in southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan, they're calling for a dry area, but it looks like the whole Great Lakes Basin will be a little wetter for the spring. And let's go to the next slide for the summer. Now here, the two different forecasts are in agreement that it looks like the whole Ontario area and much of all Eastern Canada is all going to be well above normal. And that goes right from Alberta right through to Newfoundland. So it looks like for this summer, you'll be having pretty warm canoeing conditions. Looks like it'll be colder way on the West Coast, but pretty nice warm canoeing weather. So hopefully the lakes will really warm up and you'll get some great swimming opportunities. That's for temperature. And let's go to the next slide for precipitation. Here, so here's the precip, and the American one is calling for a little higher precipitation in the Great Lakes Basin. It looks really dry on the West Coast, but overall for Ontario, it's looking like it'll be kind of right at the norms, maybe a little drier up to the north of Sault Ste. Marie in the Algoma area or up around Marathon. But overall, it looks like we'll be kind of right at the norms for precip. So pretty good canoeing weather in the outlook. And next slide, Mark. And with that, I wish you sunny skies for this summer. And hopefully now you've got a little better interest, better knowledge about how you could kind of decide what's going to be going on for the coming day or next few days. And a really good thing is to check out before your trip what the outlook is. And just as a reminder, we'll do another tailwind of Rick Mercer's clip right here to remind you about how bad the weather can be. Go ahead, Mark.
Just looking for it.
Okay.
My computer is getting a little bit old, so I'm just closing a bunch of windows so that it's a little bit happier when it plays the videos off.
And that's a big file. I think it's 80 megabytes, so it's a pretty big file. Paul, I think you had a good question.
Yeah, Rob, I was wondering, I'm not sure you referred to it, when you're looking for ridges and troughs on a weather map, how are they depicted on the map? How can you tell the difference between the two?
They'll have that lines on there, and usually they'll say the word ridge and they'll say the word trough, but they'll have a dashed line for the ridge, and then a trough might be dashes and dots in there. But they usually include the word trough or ridge. And all of you probably have information overload with that. Are there any things you've observed when you were on a canoe trip, any questions you have, or any other cloud types you've seen out there?
One that came in while I'm doing this is maybe you could do a demonstration of how you find where the center of a lower high is again, where you stick out your arm.
Sure. So you would just put your back to the wind and then put your arm out, your left arm at a 45-degree angle, and that'll be where the low pressure is. And if you imagine that, if you're in a normal good weather pattern, you probably have the wind will be out of the northwest. And I was saying that weather systems always go west to east. And so that'll mean that the low pressure is downwind of you and you're getting high pressure into your area. If you have a low pressure, you probably have the wind out of the east or southeast or something, and you put your left arm out, and that means the low is still moving into your system. But as I was saying, if you're getting things like that occluded front or a one of those stationary fronts, that throws all that out the window.
Rob, we're getting one question in from Robert. Can you explain, or from PC, sorry, can you explain what a shelf cloud is and how we, and should we be concerned?
First, I'm going to answer another thing. There's a cloud I really like. It's called the Lenticular Cloud. And I do a lot of stuff in the Rocky Mountains. And you'll get a mountain up there, and it builds its own weather pattern. And you'll see a particular cloud that'll sit right on top of the mountain, like say Robson or so, and it just sits there. A shelf cloud is one where you get that kind of flat system, and you might be having heavy precipitation in behind that. So that's, maybe next time I'll put a picture of a shelf cloud in there. I'm not sure about the physics of a shelf cloud.
One question from Jane has come in.
I'm just going to put the video.
Sure.
Precedents. How did they cope? Many didn't, but many defeated the odds, and they rose to the occasion.
I couldn't think of myself. There was no time. I thought of my child and how she needed to get to Montessori. And I reached out with my hand and my isotoner glove, and I pushed the snow off the windshield. And I just got in the car. After that, I blacked out.
For many, it was just too much.
I always thought that this was the type of thing that happened to other people. But when I saw the snow, I started screaming, "Where's the army? Where's the police? Why me? Why now? Why Toronto?"
And when it was over, the horrifying numbers came in. 20 centimeters of snow on the streets of Toronto.
Snow in Toronto. A CBC National special report.
I had permission from CBC to run that, by the way.
So I'm going to go back to the chat, because there are a couple of questions came directly to me. So this way we can get them in the order in which they arrived. Let me skip down. So what if you're on a big lake with the shore entirely covered by forest and a lightning storm is approaching? What should you do?
Overall, the lightning is going to hit the highest tree. And yes, it would be good to get off the lake. Sometimes sailboats will be hit by lightning, and they'll get little pin marks all the way around the hull where the lightning exits out of the boat into the water. And if the boat was heeling at the time and it was like this, the pin marks will be all the way around the hull. And when they go back to their dock, they have to keep the boat at that exact same angle, or water's going to get in all the holes. So yes, you should get in off the lake when you're in a canoe, because you're probably going to be one of the targets. And usually there's some higher ground around you. You don't want to be on the higher ground. You want to be on the lower ground, and keep kind of a low profile where you don't stand up. You have your hands and knees on the ground.
The other thing I'll point out that a lot of people forget is water is an excellent conductor of electricity. And so if something on the lake is zapped by electricity, by a lightning bolt some distance away, if you're just standing right close to the shore, you could get it from the water just going up to the moisture in the shore. So, it's not only being the target, it's anything on the lake is a target, makes you a target.
And Mark, I just want to add one thing that let's say you are experiencing a lightning storm and it's going through your area, and especially if you're using that Blitz or Krung or whatever it is, that app I showed you, and you're seeing the lightning come to your area on your app, and then it's in your area and you see it moving away. There's about a 20-minute period where lightning strikes could still happen. So the fact that the biggest lightning strikes have stopped in your area doesn't mean that the danger is over. It's still for about 20 more minutes after the lightning's gone through your area. So if you seek protection in the lower area, don't move out of that area till 20 minutes out after the lightning's gone through.
Rob, we have a question from Rose. She had her hand up, and maybe if she can unmute and ask her question.
Hi, Rob, and thank you, Paul. Your trick about the wind in the back and then left arm out, does that only apply to the Western Hemisphere? And it's the opposite?
That's exactly right. In the Southern Hemisphere, then it would work the other way around. Okay.
And what does that do for me when I know high pressure behind me, lower pressure here or there?
I wish this was live, because if I'm standing there, I could show it so much better. Like I was saying, weather systems always go west to east in the Northern Hemisphere. And if you know that the low is downwind of you, that would be east of you, then the low is moving out away from you, you're getting high pressure. If the low is upwind of you, so that'll be to the west of you, because weather systems go west to east, it's moving into your area. So you're going to be getting precipitation the next, well, could be next 10 minutes or 10 hours or anything like that. But that lets you know where the high is and where the low is.
And in other words, which way is it? Is it coming to me or leaving me?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I did the session today. I recommended a colleague of mine, Ron Bianchi, that next year he might be good to do a similar weather training. And I do training like this for provincial departments of transportation and municipalities. And they always take, usually it takes about 2 or 3 of these training sessions to kind of get it in your blood and get a good feel for it. So there's a buddy of mine, Ron Bianchi, I'm recommending for next year, and he'll give you a little different slant. And I think all these things you'll kind of learn more and more. Ron does a lot of talking to sailing clubs, and for the Olympics, he's asked to do the weather for it, and he has to give it equally to all countries. He can't bias it towards Canada, but I think it would be great if Ron did the session next year, and you'll get a little more information out of it.
Thank you.
Rob, we had a question from Jane, member of the club, and she's working at an outdoor theater. Any words of wisdom for them?
In the Ottawa area and other areas, there's what you're asking is for weather sources, and private sector companies specialize in doing that, especially after that stage had collapsed here in Ottawa, but that does cost money. If you want to know free sources, the Environment Canada source is fairly good, and the Weather Network. One thing about Environment Canada, because they're the government and they have the Canadian model, they tend to really stick with what the Canadian model is using. The Weather Network, they tend mostly to the European model, which tends to do a little better than the Canadian or the US model. And some private sector companies, they use kind of forecast where we look, there's no one forecast model that's always right. So what we do is we sort of look at all the different models and weigh the one that's been working recently. We put more trust in that one. But the Weather Network, and I used to work for them, they use that approach where they're looking at all the different models. So you could use that, and they'll pinpoint it right down to a postal code. So it's not too bad. If you want the highest level, the private sector would do the best job. And one of the really fun contracts I've worked on is SkyDome doing the weather for if they should close the roof. And I've got lots of stories about that. And by the way, one of the criteria when they close the roof is when it's colder than 15 degrees. And the reason is people drink, they'll switch to a warm coffee instead of a cold beer, and they lose $200,000 in beer sales per game if the roof is open when it's 15 degrees or colder. So that's one of their criteria, but I've got many stories about SkyDome. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Rob, there was one about something called the Windy website. I'm not sure what that is, but
that's a really good one. If you Google windy and say winds at Ottawa or something like that, at my company, we are doing the weather for solar panels and wind turbine farms down in Mexico, and we use that heavily. That's a great source.
Okay. Lynette had a question. I think when they were up in Angava, they had 5 weeks of prevailing easterlies. Is there an explanation for that?
You were in a low pressure system, and that's when we're probably on the weather maps. There's a thing called the Labrador low, and you were getting a Labrador low. And sometimes you've been hearing about that polar vortex where there was a few years ago where we were getting many of those weather systems where it brought the really cold polar air down towards Ottawa, and you were in a Labrador low. And that sometimes that Labrador low, it's quasi-stationary where it doesn't move a lot. It'll stay at one place, and that's exactly what you were in.
Okay. There's a somebody who's shown as W indicates that he or she has his hand raised. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, thank you. Just want to ask Robert about that 20-minute period after the first lightning has struck. So does that mean that, like, if after 20 minutes, that means if there's nothing going on with any further lightning or thunderstorm, thundering, then does that mean that it's quote unquote safe, and we can get back out to the outside? Or, you know, how can we tell when's a safe time to get back out after the lightning, like after the 20 minutes?
Great question. And my overall answer to that is yes, you should be safe. In weather, just about every rule is made to be broken. And that's because Mother Nature controls the weather. We get the forecast absolutely perfectly right, but Mother Nature likes to go and screw around with us. So just about every rule in weather, there's exceptions and they're made to be broken. But overall, yes, 20 minutes after the last big crashes and thunder that you're hearing, then you should be safe unless another system comes after that. I remember at the Barrie tornado, there's always, for the insurance, they want to look at if there was one front or a second front. And the thing that caused all the damage at the Barrie tornado was the second front. And that was significant in the insurance industry because then it's not paid by the first insurer, it's paid by the reinsurer, the secondary insurer. And so they're always looking if there's one front or a second. But overall, yes, 20 minutes after the lightning ends, then you should be safe unless another system comes after that.
Thank you, Rob. And the further question to this is that, is there any signs like the clouds, you know, how the clouds would look like? Because I know that Mother Nature always changes, right? So is there any signs or things that I can look at up in the sky that, oh, okay, maybe there's another thunderstorm or lightning going on?
Yeah, if you're seeing that anvil shape, where instead of being a straight column, it's going into an anvil shape. And if you're seeing a lot of turbulence there, and what's actually happening inside the cloud is you have warm drafts going up, cold drafts going down. And the way that you get the really big hail, we do a lot of work in the Calgary area where they'll get baseball-sized or grapefruit-sized hail. And what's going on is a warm draft will carry a little piece of dust and it gets some moisture clinging to it. It then freezes at 40,000 feet. It comes down because of the weight. Warm air current brings it up again. And so it's getting layer upon layer of freezing rain. And so if you're getting those cloud systems where it's got a very, like a cone shape or anvil shape, and really dark at the bottom, and especially if you get a bit of that greenish tinge in there, and usually you'll see rapid movement. One other question people sometimes ask is, you'll get one layer of clouds going one direction and another layer going another direction. And what causes that? And that's exactly the kind of thing where you might have cold air mass coming below, warm air above. So the warm air mass, they may have winds out of the east or southeast, and the cold air flow might be having a westerly wind. And so when you're seeing that mixing where one layer of clouds is going one direction, another is going another, that's real turbulence, and that's a really good time to develop some severe storms as well.
Thanks so much, Robert. Sorry, can I ask one more question regarding the tornadoes?
You know, it'll probably help other people, so sure.
Okay, thank you. And also same with the tornado like situation, like obviously it comes and goes. And is there any, well, the lightning is a 20-minute kind of, reference, or the cone-shaped cloud that you mentioned right now as a sign. Now, how do we know that, when is the last tornado and when is it like safe again to get back out? You know what I mean? Like, because it comes and goes and so quick. Yeah.
In
Thanks.
meteorology, that's where we use Doppler radar. Doppler shows you the circular, and for a tornado, you need that circular movement. And the US is way ahead of Canada in terms of Doppler radar. In Canada, we're just installing Doppler radar now. And but sometimes people have their own Doppler radar. City of Calgary's got their own. And you really need that signature with the swirling winds, with the circular pattern. And you can see that on radar.
Okay, thanks so much for your expertise. Thank you, Robert. Thanks.
Right, we have a question from Mary as to whether there can be a list of the apps and the websites that you've mentioned. And this probably goes out to Mark as well, if that could be built into maybe the summary that comes out of the presentation.
Sure, I'll be happy to put that together. And I've actually emailed that friend of mine, Ron Bianchi. He's got a really great list. And by the way, I'm a sailor, and I sail big boats, and we do racing. And often there's different winds at the shore and offshore and onshore. And we use that for a strategy of winning races. But the sailors often have really good links to getting more of this detailed weather. And yeah, I'll be happy to put a list of links together for you.
Okay, and now we have another question from Rose, I think relating to lightning on the water.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you for seeing me again. Oh, bottom line, if lightning strikes, you are in a canoe on the water, don't stick your hand or limb into the water. Is that it?
Maybe, but the thickness of a canoe, it'll go right through the canoe. It might be just marginally safer to not put your hand in the water because you're going to be a conductor then. But the canoe is so thin, it'll go through a thick sailboat that's got and I'm talking about a big sailboat that's got 1.5 inches of fiberglass or so. It'll go right through that. So And I don't want to scare you. Just before you, Rose, there was the question of tornadoes. And one thing you get are water spouts. And a water spout is a tornado not happening over land, but over water. And actually in the winter, if we went on Lake Ontario, there's way more water spouts in the winter than the summer. But that might be a thing to watch out for. We watch out for that when we're sailing, but if you were in a small canoe, that could really cause a lot of turbulence in the water because you get that swirling. So water spout is another thing to watch out for.
So even if you're in a wooden canoe, that doesn't save you much.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I heard on dry land, if you when I first learned about electricity and shocks, like if you happen to grab onto the two wires, you're fine if you're both hands on it, but you will get shocked, maybe killed if you let one go because it's no longer conduit, like the whole barrel shape you told us to form. So say we luckily survive a lightning striking canoe, kayak, watercraft of whatever material. Does the fact that we stick our paddle in to get back to shore break that circuit that saved us?
No, I don't think that would be a major, it wouldn't be, it would be a negligible effect. It wouldn't be a strong risk or hazard compared, just being in the storm is the hazard, not whether you're putting the paddle in the water or your hand in the water. And that's where I was saying, if you got a negative strike, you'd probably live through it. But if it was a positive strike, you'd be a goner no matter what. So, and
that's the negative or positive. It's intrinsic to the lightning itself, right? The ions in it.
Yeah, we do lightning for Hydro One and IESO, and I've got screen capture of a storm that hit the Ottawa area, and we probably had about 30,000 lightning hits, and of the 30,000, probably about just maybe 4 or 5 were positive. But when you get a positive hit, if it hits like a broadcast antenna, it'll take out the whole antenna, or if it hits a hydro building, it'll take out the whole system right there. So that's the positive hits. But they're really, like I was saying, in that particular storm, there were maybe 30,000 negative hits and only 4 or 5 positive ones.
So if we survive a lightning strike while we're on the water, we are good. Just keep on paddling to shore, right? Is that the
But that's where it's great to use all these tips and avoid doing the being on the water when you're in that low pressure system. And Paul, I guess you could say you and I are not good ones to talk, because Paul, this summer when we were going from the French River into Lake Nipissing, there's a pretty long portage. And we were getting a black storm, and the temperature, all the signs where I had the cold front, where the temperature just plunges down. Remember, Bridget was so cold, and the wind was high and the wind was veering around. And we were talking about, should we go ashore and be safe? But the portage was just ahead. Paul, I welcome your comments. We decided to go to the portage.
Yeah, there wasn't much, there wasn't really much of another area to go to anyway at the time. That was the problem.
Yeah. Paul, before you go on, I just want to talk a couple of things to think about for Rose coming to your issues about thunder and lightning. When you're canoeing, odds are, you're dealing with a lot of water. Your paddle's going to be wet. You may have water in the bottom of your canoe. You may have a slightly wet foot. So, and water is an excellent conductor. So, pretty much it doesn't matter what you're doing if you're on the water. You're in contact with the lake, and then if the lake gets charged, you are what you are, right? So just think of it, water, electricity, bad combination, don't mix.
Yeah.
The other thing that we haven't talked about too much when it comes to thunderstorms is wind, and why you want to pay attention to looking out for the weather before, if you see a great big anvil heading your way and it's not currently windy, you can pretty well count that pretty soon it's going to be windy. And if that wind is blowing offshore, good luck getting onshore to get out of the lightning. So when you see it coming, don't necessarily think, oh, I'll wait until I see or hear lightning. Think about, oh, what happens if that brings a whole lot of wind coming at me? Am I going to be able to deal with that wind? And if you're on a big lake, the answer may well be no. Lightning or no, if it gets that windy, you want to get off the water just so that you can get to the shore.
I don't know what an anvil looks like. I think it's an agrarian equipment.
Oh, it's what blacksmiths use. And it's got a really big flat top and a really pointy end. And then it's got a smaller base.
So does it point to the direction that the wind will blow, just by its shape?
No, it could really, I've seen it go both, point both to the east or west or different directions. Paul, I think as a trip leader, it might be good for you to comment on if you're seeing all these signs, there's a certain point where it's just wise to get off the water.
Absolutely. I've been on trips where we've had heavy wind, and there is this concept of just being windbound. And you're a whole lot better being on the shore, waiting out the wind, than trying to get to a certain point, and potentially putting your group in a difficult situation. So, in a lot of these situations, and what Rob has been talking about, your best course of action is get to the shore and wait it out. You don't want to be on the water in either a heavy wind condition or a thunderstorm condition. And they can, unfortunately, as Rob was depicting, we had something come at us very quickly on the trip that we had. Unfortunately, I think we got off the water and about 20 seconds later, the skies opened up and it poured, but you can have that situation. Just wanted to move, Rob, to a question from Mary. And she's talking about, well, what if you can't see the sky, you're in dense bush or whatever? Is the presence of dew in the area a good indicator of what weather you're going to have for the day?
And that's only in the early morning. If you're getting that in the afternoon, then probably you're in some kind of you're probably in some kind of mist or fog or rain or something like that. But if you're in a high pressure system, and if you're hiking like I do in the Rockies, that's one of our indicators if we should have our raincoat handy. So even if you're in a dense forest and you're getting dew in the morning, that's a great sign. If you're not getting dew, then you better keep your raincoat handy.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. There are some comments that have been put into the chat room. Did anybody else have a question? If you do, please unmute yourself, and hopefully we won't have too many people at the same time going. Rose, do you have one?
I do. The reason I asked about the anvil shape is to follow up what I think it's Michael or Mike Scott was saying. He was saying if we can tell from the anvil of the cloud which way the wind will blow, whether it's away from the shore or towards the shore, we should just call it quits before even getting on the water. So that's why I want to know, does the direction of the anvil tell whether it will be away or towards the shore?
I haven't seen that at all. You make me want to look at different, those are cumulonimbus or CBs. And I haven't noticed that there's a particular angle that tells you which way the wind is going. It makes me want to check that out now, but it's a good question. I'll look into it. We were just talking about severe weather and getting to shore. Carol and Glenn, I don't know if you have any observations from your trip, because you were certainly caught in some really severe winds and systems where you were well offshore and had to decide if you're going to keep on going or come in.
If I may, Rob, I've just put up an image of a cumulonimbus cloud. So here's that up there. That's what the anvil looks like. Okay. So
thank you very much, Mark.
So you'll see it looks almost flat at the bottom. Then it just goes way, way, way up high. And then, not flat at the top, but it's sort of, you can see how it's spreading out at the top again. And if you look underneath that, it's going to be black, black, black at the bottom. And if it's not otherwise cloudy, you may see, white at the top. And when I was wind, by the way, I didn't say the wind was going to be blowing in any direction. Thunderstorms almost always come with big strong wind, and if I'm on a lake, it doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing. I don't want to be on the lake if it's if it's a 30-kilometer wind, even if it's blowing the way I want it to go, it's still going to be a lot of work. There's going to be a lot of waves. There's going to be turbulence. There's going to be a lot. So when you see something like that, there's wind coming. You don't necessarily know which way it's coming, but you do know you don't want to be in it. Sorry, Rob, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just wanted to do my own windy days.
I'm glad you put the picture up there, Mark. And just one thing to add is that if you're flying in an Air Canada flight at 35 or 40,000 feet, you'll be right at the tops of those cumulonimbus. So that's the height they go. The nice little puffy cumulus clouds that I showed in that first picture of the clouds, they'll be maybe at like 2,000 feet, 1,500 feet, 3,000 feet. And then the cirrus in the middle, that might be, that'll be higher, but those CBs, those go right up to 40, 45,000 feet. And Air Canada flight, they'll fly around that. They won't fly through it. Carol and Glenn, I see you there. Do you have any comments about when you were on the water and decisions about getting to land or staying out there or anything like that?
Yes, we were paddling on the Saskatchewan River in Saskatchewan, 2018, and 7 tornadoes touched down in an area not too far from us.
South of us. Yeah, it was it was probably 100 kilometers south of us, but it was a hyperactive tornado event. And we felt the effects of it on the water, so much so that we had to get off the water and be windbound.
Mm-hmm. But the trick is, we learned to read the clouds after a while, and we called those stacker clouds the cumulus clouds, and we saw them. It was extremely hot and humid, and because it was so hot and humid and it was so windy and the clouds were coming, we kind of rode the wind until we thought it was time to get off the water. So we did take advantage of the wind that was at our back. So we got some really good kilometers in that day, but we knew enough to get off the water and get far inland, not close to the shore, but far inland to seek the shelter of the forest. And that's I think the whole trick of learning to read the weather is knowing when to get off the water and getting off in time, because it's just not worth it to be stuck
don't leave it to
there.
the last minute. No.
Yeah. So.
And a thing I'll add to that is the hazard in a tornado is not the winds. It's things that might be propelled by the wind. So it could be a 2x4, it could be a rock. And I've seen a picture of a F5 tornado at Manitoba where there was a van, and it wasn't a minivan, it was a full-size van, and it was about 100 feet up in the air. So it's not the wind that you have to watch out for. It's the tree branches and the stuff that's blowing around. So if you're in an urban area, that's where bridge culvert or some kind of protected area, getting underground in a subway or anything like that, that gives you more protection.
Yeah, we tried to find open areas sometimes too, but it's hard when you're on the side of the river and you're just in a canoe and you have no transportation. And it's, you try to pick the best spot
and hunker down.
and hunker down and hope for the best, I guess.
Talking about hunkering down, I remember a trip I was on in Algonquin Park, and the winds were so strong there weren't waves on the lake because the water was just going horizontally. There weren't any waves, it just went horizontally. And I could see from the weather type that it was going to be one of those 5 or 10 minute really, really bad storms. And then a high pressure was going to come after that. It was going to clear up. So instead of putting my tent up and, or instead of getting in my tent and maybe getting things wet there, I decided to just hunker down like you were saying. There was a lot of lightning there, so I stayed away from a really high hill, went down in a low spot, and I just had a good Gore-Tex jacket on. I let myself get wet, but I had my 2 Alaskan Malamutes with me, and I was just making my dinner. I was making pasta marinara. The marinara sauce was just ready to eat, and it was nice and warm. And my 2 dogs, I was hunkered down, didn't see what they were doing. They ate my marinara pasta. And then what they did is they went under between my fly and the inner fly and went there on my down sleeping bag. So they were nice and warm. They had a full belly and they were relatively dry. And here I had now a wet sleeping bag, down sleeping bag, no dinner.
And outside looking at the weather. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Lots of fun. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Is there anybody else? If you want to unmute. Okay, Mark, I don't think there are any questions.
It was a good presentation, Robert.
So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. There was supposed to be one more presentation next week on something that's really important to paddlers, which is hyperthermia and hypothermia, given by Glenn from the University of Ottawa Heat Experimental Labs. However, unfortunately, between COVID and those morons blocking off downtown, they're way behind. They're working 7 days a week just to get caught up. So we're going to have to postpone that seminar till next year. So this is the last of our seminar series. I encourage everybody to send me your comments on what you thought of this or any other seminar. I do read them. I do save them. And as part of that, if anybody has any thoughts on presentations for next year, I definitely do add them to a sheet, and I use that to help develop the seminars for next year. And so I've heard rumors that there's going to be a weather seminar next year, for example. And other than that, I thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's been very enjoyable. And Rob, just for your information, my measure of success is how many people dial in versus how many leave. And you had 57 people dialed in today, and before the question and answer, only 2 of them left early. So that says 55 people thought your presentation was worth listening to. I will be doing a very brief summary article and posting it on the website, and it'll include a link to the YouTube video. Okay. And with that, I thank you all.
Thank you.